I'm Jason Conger, and I have a blog site there where some of the stuff that we're showing here is blogged about there as well. Follow me on Twitter. I work for Splunk. I'm a practice manager at Splunk for desktop virtualization and going into the mobile apps as well with Splunk. But I've been doing Citrix for a long time, and I'm just really excited about a lot of the Citrix technologies that we're going to show today, as well as some of the non-Citrix technologies that we'll show today as well. I just really like this stuff, so it's fun, and it's a little bit of departure from what I do from a day-to-day thing, but I just like it a lot. Warren?
And I'm Warren Simondson from Control-Alt-Delete. I do a lot of sort of coding and freeware apps and get heavily into the mobile workspace. So hope you enjoyed today. We're going to do a lot of stuff. You can follow me on @CatITC. And we're going to have a lot of talk about code towards the end, as Jason said. So get excited. And I like to work the room. So if you want to get involved, get into it.
Okay, so here we go. All right, so setting all this stuff up, you know, you guys already know this, but you know, this sets the foundation for what we're going to talk about here. So with traditional desktops in your enterprise, they're normally corporately owned, which means you know a lot about what's going on those desktops, because you go through a procurement process, you spec the models, you know exactly what's on that desktop. And since you know what's on that desktop, you know how to deliver applications to that desktop. You have a wide range of things that you can do to deliver applications to that desktop, whether it's remoting, whether it's installing, whatever. You have a lot of tools at your disposal. So when we go into the mobility space, most of the time, those mobile devices are not corporately owned. And so since they're not corporately owned, that means you don't know a lot about those devices, and devices are constantly changing, screen sizes are changing, capabilities are changing. And since you don't know about a lot of these devices, you also lose a lot of the ability that you normally have to deliver applications to those mobile devices. You still have some. You still have like Citrix, and you have some RDP solutions, some VMware, PC over IP. Now Dell, I keep saying Quest vWorkspace, but now Dell, Ericom. You still have some of your stuff, but you lose a lot of the stuff that you normally had. So as IT professionals today, we have to deal with all kinds of stuff when we're talking about mobility, Apple, Windows, Android, HTML5, all this stuff. So to steal a slide from Citrix, actually this directly from Citrix, this is what we're dealing with today, right? That's what you have to support on top of PCs. So how do you do it? So traditionally, this is how we all started. You know, your big boss guy brings in his mobile device and says, hey, I want access to my corporate assets on my mobile device. And so early stages of IT was like, oh, there you go, we got you covered, right? And they're like, no, I don't like that because that's a sucky user experience. So the question is, how do I deliver a good experience? I still want to deliver a good experience. I want to support this mobile stuff. I still have all this infrastructure that I've always had in my corporation, but I need to support mobile now, so how do we do it? And we're really going to talk about a couple of ways to do that today. So starting out, you can say, all right, well, the easy way, which I just showed you, just popping an app or a desktop on a device is, I just virtualize it. So application virtualization, or just a session virtualization or presentation virtualization with XenApp, or an RDP solution or something like that. But the user experience kind of sucks. So we're down there in that lower quadrant. You see user experience low, application development easy. All right, so the other thing is you go to an ISV, so an app store, third party. You don't have any control of that app, but you can go find these apps. They may or may not fit all your needs. They may fit some, but very good user experience. And you're not over here on the application development side. You still don't put much effort in, right? Then if you really want to go all out, you can say, all right, I want to provide a really good user experience. I want to develop my own applications, my own mobile applications. Really good user experience, but a lot of application development effort. So kind of where we're going to talk about today is this sweet spot in the middle, where we're going to try to give you a good user experience without a lot of application development effort. And according to Gartner, just on VB6 migration, be a $1 billion industry by between 2012 and 2018. Of course, Gartner predicted now we'd be like a 5 billion VDI environment as well. Of course, that didn't happen, as you know. So take that with a grain of salt if you must. So anyway, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're not going to teach you how to do native application development, but we are going to teach you some tricks that kind of get you into that good user experience without a ton of effort on your part. So I kind of alluded to this. Two things we're going to talk about today. The first thing that we'll talk about is how do you do it without using any code. So what can you go back to your environment today, some of the tricks you can use to just do this. And then later on, we'll talk about some coding methods that are more involved, but they're still not super technical. And maybe it just gets your wheels going, or to suggest to some other people if you don't want to do coding yourself. Or if you do, go for it. All right, so here we go. Getting started with the non-coding methods. All right, so we're talking about non-coding methods. That means we're talking about remoting something for the most part. When you're talking about remoting something, you have to think about your remoting protocols. So over here, you have RDP-based solutions. So there's RDP, Windows, Dell, Aircom, all those, they're doing an RDP-based solution. Then you have your VMware. They do mobile stuff as well with PC over IP and VMware, well, using PC over IP. Your Citrix HDX does a lot of cool stuff, and we'll talk about that. Then you have your HTML5 solutions right here. These are mobile apps that you can run that are doing a remoting to an asset on your environment using HTML5. And then this other one called FrameHawk, that's an appliance that actually sits on your network. It's its own protocol. It's getting the packets and doing some things with those packets over, in real time. So the first thing we'll talk about really is your remoting protocols, mainly RDP and Citrix HDX. So first thing that we're going to talk about, if you don't want to do any coding at all, and your finger is your primary input device, we can make some pieces of your screen real estate bigger, because if you just remote, like this is an Excel spreadsheet, if you just remote an Excel spreadsheet, it's really hard to hit some of the buttons like, there's the minimize, maximize, close, your tabs down here. Some of those things, if they were just bigger, that might make a better user experience. So there are some registry keys, and you guys will all get this slide deck. There's some registry keys that help you do that, and they're attached right here on the slide deck. So just double click that little Word document there, and here's those registry keys that help you do that. So you can just do that. This could all be conditional since it's registry. You can make it with a GPO, whatever you want to do. But those are the registry keys that help make some of the buttons bigger to make it easier for somebody to do all this with their finger. Okay, that's one way. No coding involved, pretty easy. Not a great user experience, but better than it was. The other thing that I have seen done in the past is this is, again, an Excel spreadsheet, and you create some cells that are the size of a mobile device. And then that way you can think of your mobile device as a viewer, that you'll just be viewing one piece of your spreadsheet at a time as you zoom around. This was a lot easier when iPhone was the only thing, because there was one screen size. Now there's multiple screen sizes for iPhones, all kind of Android screen sizes. So you can do this if you know your user base, and pretty small. But if you're trying to support everything, this gets kind of spooky quick on doing that. Oh yeah, this is like, you think of your phone or your mobile device as a viewer as you're scrolling through the pane. So you're just viewing a little bit at a time, a sliding door effect. Okay. The other one that we just saw recently pop up on brianmadden.com, Jack Madden wrote about this, is Capriza. And it's going about, it's mainly for web-based applications. If you have an existing web-based application, they give you a set of tools to create mobile form factors for your web-based application really quickly and easily using drag and drop. This link right here is actually a link to Jack's article, and I pulled this screenshot directly from that article. So if you want to read more, you can go there. Do you have anything to add about Capriza? Have you done more with them more?
Capriza's, if you've got a web-based application in your office, Capriza allows you as a non-coder, and I'll put that quite clearly, it's a non-coding aspect, where you can literally look at that screen on your normal laptop or normal desktop, and it gives you a sort of a little mini iPhone, and you can drag and drop the elements of the web app across to that iPhone. It will then recode it and put it out to your website, wherever you're hosting it, and give you that application in the form of whether it be an iPhone, Android phone, etc. It's so simple. It's drag and drop, literally, and it will recode. You don't need to do a thing. So if you've got a web app that your boss is saying, I need that web app on my iPhone, and you say, I just use Safari, use whatever's native to the actual device. But then they look at it and they say, well, that button's too small, something's in the wrong place. This is what you can do. So it's a great product, and it's worth a look.
Yep, agreed. Okay. Next thing we'll talk about is something that came out with XenApp 6.5. It's called the Citrix Mobility Pack. It's just built into the product now, but at 6.5, if you're running that in your environment, it's a download that you go and you install on your server. Now we're going to talk about two Citrix things here. One's called the Mobility Pack, and later on we're going to talk about the Mobility SDK. So they're two separate things that we're talking about, but Mobility Pack has nothing to do with coding itself. And what happens when you install this Mobility Pack is this is a XenApp architecture. You see a little key here on things that are new or modified or third-party code. And you have a client device over here, so that's your Citrix receiver. And then over here you have your XenApp server. And what happens are two new virtual channels are added right here. And for location, and then you have that's mobile receiver virtual channel for things like orientation, notifications, phone calls, SMS, all this kind of stuff that gives you access to the device. So this receiver is running on your device, and so since it's running there, we can have some access to the device itself, ship that stuff back over virtual channels to your server, and you can react to those things on your server. And so since all of these things are virtual channels, they're all can be controlled via policy. And the reason that there's two virtual channels is maybe you want to get access to the pieces of the mobile device, but for security reasons you want to turn off location. So you can say, hey, over here on location, it says ICA client sensors location. Maybe depending on who you are or where you're coming in or just company-wide, you want to turn that off, but you don't want to turn off the ability to access everything else on the device. So you can control this via Citrix policies, group policies, all that kind of stuff. And so with that, we're going to talk about the mobile desktop. So we showed you earlier, like popping a mobile desktop on a mobile device. If you have a big screen form, it's not too bad. Small form factor is a little bit different, but still things are very, very tiny, like your start menus over here and whatnot, clicking on all the folders, very, very tiny. So Citrix gives you part of this mobility pack, they're able to do this mobile desktop. So take your traditional desktop and turn it into a much more touch-friendly device. So you have bigger buttons here, your icons are bigger, and there's a button right up here that you can switch between normal desktop and your kind of mobile desktop if you don't like it. And so we'll show you what that actually looks like in person. What I have here is I have my iPad, and I'll switch over here like this. And so this is my iPad, and I have 3 VMs running on my MacBook over here. I have a XenApp server, a domain controller, and a Windows 7 development machine. And so I'm connecting via wireless over here to the VM running. To the VM running, and this is the XenApp server's desktop. And so I purposely turned it in, to traditional desktop. You have your start menu down here, all this kind of stuff. This is what it looks like. But clicking the button right here, you can set this on by default. That turns it into the mobile desktop. So you'll see that the start menu change is a lot more touch friendly. You have your, all programs here. It's a lot easier to get around. There are some caveats at this. Normally I would want to, kind of drag my finger here to be able to drag through this list. But instead I have to grab that bar there. So it's just teaching somebody about that. So I have to grab the bar here to scroll through the list. Clicking on my computer gives you a nice viewer into your file system, so I can go view the files on my desktop here. And then clicking like folders on the desktop, it changes that, being able to click easily. This is a demo that we did yesterday. And so going through everything, so a much nicer user experience. And again, if you don't like it, you can click the button over here in the top, go back to your normal desktop, and you're good to go. So that's a pretty nice thing that allows you to do some mobility stuff. Again, no coding involved at all here. Questions about that before we move on? So the question is, do you need to enable it? Yeah, so that's through the policies that you can go, again, that's just a policy you can set. So by default, enable it for everybody. You can enable it per user. All the filters that you have on policies, you can control whether it's enabled or not. So.
Is it only on 6.5 or also on 6?
Is it all, it's on 6.5. And on 6.5, it's a, you install it. Going forward, it's just part of it.
And 6 does not have support?
6.0 support?
No, no support. It's 6.5. With feature release or roll up pack 1 at least. And you of course have to have some extra group policy structures to add.
Oh, and also XenDesktop works on
XenDesktop 7 as well. Okay, so yeah, unfortunately 6 got missed and that's a shame. So it's a little bit awkward, but yeah, 6.5 only with that extra hotfix.
Question, Becca?
Yeah, just curious why you left out VMware Unity Touch from this discussion, which actually virtualizes the user interface and transforms it for tablets. It's part of the 5.2 that's shipping now.
You want a mic to say that again? No, seriously, no, seriously. But just because, again, this is, as I said at the beginning, I'm excited about this stuff. I like this stuff, so it's more of a hobby than my day job. And so, because ignorance, basically, because I didn't know about, you know, I don't deal with the VMware mobility side. But seriously, if you want to get a mic to bring this up, do we have a house mic somewhere?
Looking. So as that mic comes up, people are talking about, what we're talking about here is VMware has an equal, I suppose, these days. But it's only really just come out, so.
Yeah, hi. So VMware View 5.2 has a capability that's now known as Unity Touch. I originally demoed it as a advanced development project called AppShift, and it actually virtualizes the user interface of Windows and makes modifications dynamically, delivering both Windows desktops and apps with a tablet touch-friendly user experience to both Android and iOS. It's built into the View client, so it just comes vanilla with 5.2. It's automatically enabled. We're shipping version 1. I'm going to show some new enhancements to it at VMworld. So that's another seamless alternative here.
So another non-coding seamless alternative. So there you go.
And thanks for that. With both of those, however, and I have used the VMware option, the issue always comes down to both the Citrix and the VMware option is that it still really just turns that Windows screen into a sort of touch-friendly. That's, I think I heard the key word there, touch-friendly. If your boss or whoever the case that you're trying to deliver to via mobile wants that sort of native mobile sort of app in their face, it just really becomes a Windows app for little fingers with both VMware and the Citrix. So there's a little bit more you have to do if you want to go right into make it look like a real iPhone, Android app. So these are really just skins, I suppose you could talk about, and they just skin the Windows look and form it to the actual device. So there's something important to note there. It's not the best experience for everybody. So don't just think you can deliver it and hey, wow, that's great. Yep. There's always a complaint with both those options.
Thanks. Okay. Other questions?
Quick question about the Citrix and I guess maybe also for Unity, but with Windows 8, is this all compatible with Windows 8 too?
With the VDI structure? Yeah, okay, so with VDI, absolutely, Windows 8, Windows 7, no problem at all. Okay, we'll do the same. As long as you have Feature Pack 2 on XenDesktop. Okay?
Okay. Good questions. Others?
What about applications themselves? You just showed Windows Explorer.
Yep, that's
And
next.
I'll get to that.
Well, actually, we're doing a published app next. All right. So applications themselves. So this is another cool thing, and again, this is because I'm familiar with the Citrix Mobility Pack. There's another cool thing with the Citrix Mobility Pack that when you're publishing an application. So traditionally, you have a application and you have these text boxes. Remember earlier I mentioned there's 2 virtual channels. One of them gives you access to some of the device features. And so this is another feature that you can turn on with Mobility Pack. When focus moves into a text box, we can tell the mobile device to pop up the keyboard, the mobile device's keyboard, or if you get into a combo box, pop up the mobile device's picker to select those things. This makes it a lot easier as well for an end user. So we have a demo on that real quick. And so basically all I did here is publish character map. And that's just allows you, if you're doing a word processing, to do different kind of characters, insert those into your document. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to touch in this box right here, and as long as my demo works correctly, the native keyboard should pop up. So click that, the native keyboard pops up right there. If I click this combo box right here, the native picker should show up. So I click that, and Citrix is remoting all the options in that picker to the native picker right here on the device. So I can go through and click this, and it's a much more native device feel for me. Now, caveat, this doesn't always work. So I tried this first with Microsoft Word, and it didn't work, and a lot of it has to do with the way this is implemented using accessibility options. So your mileage may vary, but a lot of the apps I have seen work, but the very first one I tried, Microsoft Word, did not work on the combo boxes. But that's another one. So questions on this one? Before we move on.
Just turn that on for the app, or do you have to go to each box and say, I want this to occur?
So the question was, did I turn it on for the app, or just did I have to go specify the boxes? And it's on for the app. I mean, actually, it's on the server. It's another policy. It says remote all the drop-down boxes or remote all the combo boxes. Another one, I mean, just if you want the keyboard to pop up at any time on this, you can just do 3-finger touch. So just touch with 3 fingers. If I get them all at the same time, I guess I'm not getting them. I say that, but normally.
The fat finger syndrome.
The fat finger syndrome, so that's not working for me. But you know, that's a 3-finger touch as well.
A good point that we always get asked about is Jason shows this app and you say, well, I can still see the blue screen in the background, that's Windows. How do I make this turn into a full-size app on the iPad or Android device? So I'll cover that a little bit later, but you can do that. You can quite happily turn this into a iPhone, Android-looking application without the Windows sort of background. The other thing that sort of is always brought up about the pop-ups, etc., is, and Jason said it, does it work for every single app? The key point here is the group policies that are given with the Citrix structure. You have to turn certain things on, otherwise this won't work. So if you just install the hotfix I was talking about before, it won't be straight away. You've got to ensure that your group policies are structured to make this work.
Okay. Other questions before we move on? Because that's it on Citrix for the time being. We're going to move on to some other technologies. Okay. Actually, I do have one more slide on Citrix. This is when you're publishing an application. When on the application description, if you put this phrase right here on the description, keyword mobile, a lot of cool stuff happens for mobility devices, and this doesn't affect at all the desktop. It's just if this triggers receiver, says if you see that in the description, do these things automatically for you. Which I'm not going to read through those, but it locks some of the screens. It makes some pinching and zooming kind of turns that off for you, so it makes the experience a little bit easier. A lot of things you won't even recognize, you don't even think to do, but that does that. Okay.
So does everyone know where that is when you publish an application and you give it description, location, etc.? In that published application, you go to the description area, you type in keywords : mobile, and it automatically says, well, I can be a mobile app, or I can be a desktop app.
Yep.
But that doesn't affect the native experience, though, right?
That's correct. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. So your Windows environment stays the same. So you publish the same app, but if you put that in, it will realise I can do Windows and I can do the buttons, change the drop downs, etc. Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned before there was group policies and you being able
Correct.
to can you give some specifics? Or?
Have you got them in your slides?
I just showed the one in the slide. So there are
got it.
Citrix policies, which are controlled via group policy, and those are in the documentation for the pack when you load it down. So by default, it's not on.
Slide deck, so.
Yeah.
So you're referring to group policies which control the Citrix policies?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. There's
Not mutually exclusive policies.
Yeah, well, with Citrix now, you can do either. You can do a Citrix policy or say, I do want to do a group policy, so you have the option of which one you want to do. So if you want to do everything with group policy with Citrix, you can do that now versus a Citrix policy.
Yeah, I think your question is there a separate sort of MMC structure? There is. So when you, let's just say you're working on your computer at work and you're the sysadmin, you need to load this particular Citrix MMC module onto your group policy structure for it to actually show up. Okay? Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving right along. Okay, so now we're done with non-coding methods. Unless somebody else knows a non-coding method, but we're going to move into some code. All right, so here we go. All right, so you're saying, I want to take the jump into doing some coding in my environment, and you think about, here's the devices that I want to support. You have platforms over here, and then what you need to develop on those platforms right here. So say I want to do a iOS application, which means I need an iOS SDK. You need a Mac to do it legally. You need Objective-C, and I use Xcode. If I want to do Android, then you see I need Android, I need Eclipse, I need Java or C, C++ to do these things. So if it's not terrible if you just want to support these 2 devices, but if you say, hey, now I want to do some Windows 8 or if you want to do BlackBerry, something like that, then it gets a little more involved, and you have to keep up all these code bases for these different devices. So there are options that, this is as close to the device as you're going to get. This is a native application, runs on the devices, and it's all native code. That's as close as you're going to get to the device. There are options if you want to kind of extrapolate some of the complexity of doing multiple devices and code bases for each device and still get really close to the device. One is if you just want to do a web app, there are HTML5 options that give you some native device features with HTML5. But the one that I'm going to demo here that I really like is Phonegap. And what it is, it's very similar to kind of the, it's a framework that gives you access to all your native device, or most of your native device features. I won't say all, most of your native device features. But the cool thing about it is you're not writing native code. So the previous slide we had here, where it says, all right, you need to do Objective-C or Java or C++ or C#, it takes that piece away from you. What you write it in is HTML and JavaScript. So Phonegap gives you this JavaScript framework that gives you access to all the features, most of the features of the device. And the thought behind it is, if I'm going to develop a native application and I need to hire somebody to do this, then all these specialized languages out there is going to cost me a lot more than somebody that just knows HTML and JavaScript, because there's a lot more developers out there that can do plain old HTML and JavaScript, and you just give them this framework to work in, and then you have a native application. And then also your code is portable. So what I'm about to show you, I'll do an iPhone application, take the exact same code, move it into the Android device over here, and all of it works the same. So your code is portable as well. And also it's important to remember, as I'm doing the development on this, we're creating native applications in the end. So it goes through and it compiles, and even though I did all the coding in HTML and JavaScript, we're creating a native application that you could put on the Apple Store, you could put it on Android Marketplace. There are actually a lot of apps out there on both of these platforms, Android Marketplace, App Store, that are written with Phonegap. There's, you can't tell. Now there's a caveat, like I have noticed that some of the Phonegap apps are not quite as snappy as a native app, probably because it's going through the translation process, the HTML5 to go into the native device, but you can get a lot of the stuff. And as I said, you can't get all of the native device features, but you can get most. So this is showing you for each platform, iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, Windows Phone, WebOS, Symbian, all the different features that Phonegap is giving you access to. And so you can get to a lot of things like accelerometer, camera, compass. You can get to a lot of those native device features with Phonegap. So here we go, show you a demo. Now, I'm going to start out with iOS, and we're just going to code a really simple BriForum app. And now, Phonegap doesn't take away the IDE that you need. So I'm still in Xcode, and I'm still creating a native app. I'm doing this on the Mac here. And when I'm done, this is an app that I could push out to the App Store if I wanted to. And when I do Android, I have to go into another development environment. So I'm not changing the IDE, but you can see the code that I'm doing here is all HTML and JavaScript. So just plain old HTML. When we load up the JavaScript, Cordova is a code name for Phonegap. And we're just setting some real easy functions here. What we're going to do is put a text box, give you an option for an alert option, and then show that alert. But right here, this code right here is a little bit hard to see in the back. See if I zoom in on it. No, it's not working. But all it's doing is saying this navigator.notification.alert, that's saying use the local device's alert mechanism to show this alert. So I'm getting access to the local device features. So if I run this, this is what it actually looks like. All right, so here we have our BriForum application. It says, enter your message. So we'll start typing hello right here, and you'll see the autocorrect thing is over here saying it should be capitalized, all that, that stuff. This is a simulator. This is actually like an iPhone here. Then if I click the drop-down box here, the native device picker shows up to show me, the options that I have. I say I want to do a text notification. Click done. Click this notify button, and the native devices pop-up is coming here, right? So this is all, this is a native application that's running, but the code behind it is not Objective-C. It is actually HTML and JavaScript. So if I want to do the same thing in Android, normally I had to load up an Android IDE, which is Eclipse, go start coding in Java instead of Objective-C, and do all this stuff again. But over here I have Eclipse loaded, and it's a straight copy and paste on the code actually. So again, just HTML and JavaScript. I literally did just copy from the Xcode environment, paste into Eclipse, and now Phonegap's going to take care of everything else for me. And so I have the, let's run this here. So now I have my Android emulator down here, and that will pop up. We have our exact same application, and it does the exact same thing. So if I click in here, the native keyboard pops up, and type hi. And then the exact same thing right here, our native devices picker shows up. So I want to do a text, and now I click the notify button, and Android's window pops up. So I've used the same exact code from one app to another. I've gone completely different platforms, but I haven't able to have a common code base and go to the different platforms and get access to the native devices using just HTML and JavaScript. So that makes life a lot easier if you're trying to do a native application. Okay, questions on that?
Jason, actually, it's pretty important to work out where these emulators came from. This is obviously from the Android SDK straight through.
Yes, right.
And the other emulator, where did that one come from?
That's part of Xcode. Yeah, the iPhone emulator just built into Xcode, which you get with your Mac.
So the Phonegap is an application that sits on either device, right?
No, Phonegap doesn't sit on the device. Phonegap is a development framework, and when I go through and compile this, the end result is an IPK that I can then put on the store, and somebody can go and download it, and it runs on the device. You don't even know. It creates a native application. There's no piece that's running on the mobile device itself.
Okay, gotcha.
Right. Okay. All right.
Where's Xcode pulling the framework from? Can you show real quick?
Sure. Yeah. So over here in Xcode,
JavaScript file?
yep, that's exactly what it is. So the thing that I do right here is you just load up. Here's your framework right here. This Cordova. I'm using an older version here because that's the first one I did. But that's the JavaScript framework. Now, when you set, there's directions on Phonegap website that says here's how you set up your development environment. The one for Xcode was quite a bit easier to set up than Eclipse, but it's not a, there are steps that you have to go through to set all the framework up. But then once you get all your stuff set up, it's the same code base. So this code base, like I literally just did Control A to select all, paste it in Eclipse, run it, and it ran. Okay. So that's Phonegap. The one caveat with Phonegap is we're talking enterprise applications right now. And so this is cool, but now we have a data problem. So it's all running on our mobile device, but if we're talking about enterprise applications, a lot of times your data is in your corporate office or your enterprise and not on your mobile device. So you do have access to local storage with Phonegap. So at this point you can say, oh, I'm going to do some syncing, which again you get into the management of the application itself on the device, or maybe I want to do a VPN between the device and corporate. So we have a disconnect. So that's not anything new with native device applications already, but if you're trying to do corporate, you have a data problem. And also, I mean, Jack Madden wrote this book about enterprise mobility management. All these Phonegap applications are traditional applications that fit into MDM, MAM. It's just another application. Although I use Phonegap to create it, I have all the traditional mobility management features to manage those things. So That's the thing with Phonegap. You still have the data problem, but you do have all your mobility management to come in there and try to do some of those things. So again, we're going to talk about Citrix because, yes?
So how do you resolve the data issue then?
So how do you resolve the data issue? So that means that you come to, when we're talking about Phonegap, we're just creating native applications, and so this is not the first time that you're going to have a native application on the device, so you have some kind of strategy already for all your mobile devices. I'm just saying this fits in with the same strategy of all those. So, you can have your device do local sync if you want, which a lot of people do. I use a lot of corporate applications that I have to sync back up on a time basis. You can do VPN, which I have some of my corporate apps that do VPN back. It's just, it's a little bit more thought involved on that.
But one strategy for all.
Yeah, because we're just talking, this is not any different than any other mobile application out there. It's just an easier way to create it. Question?
You're saying that the access to that data, though, those issues are outside of Phonegap.
Right, exactly. It has nothing to do with Phonegap. I'm just saying any mobile application, you have a data issue as far as being it. So whether you download one that some third party wrote, you have a data issue with that, trying to either do a sync or a VPN or something like that. Phonegap's no different. We just use a different framework to create the application. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Back to Citrix. So earlier we mentioned the Mobility Pack, which is different than the Mobility SDK. Now the Mobility SDK it's a lot like Phonegap, where the Mobility SDK is going to give you access to a lot of the mobile device features, and then you don't have to develop in a mobile application, so you don't have to use the Xcode or the Objective-C or anything like this. You're developing Windows applications, because now the application is going to reside on a XenDesktop VDA or XenApp server, and we're going to remote that. And using the virtual channels, we're going to allow those Windows applications to have access to the native device features. And so it's very similar in concept to Phonegap, where you have this framework, we're going to get access to the native device features, but we're not going to use native device code to do it. And so the mobile application SDK, it comes with all of these plugins to the mobile device. So the receiver is installed on the mobile device. So the question before came in, Phonegap, do we install something on the device? No, we're creating native applications. With the mobile application SDK, you have Citrix Receiver on your mobile device, and Citrix Receiver is giving you access to those mobile device features. And then we can use the publish application or remote desktop or whatever to tell Citrix Receiver to go do this thing on the mobile device and report it back up to me via virtual channel to my hosted desktop or application. And so the first thing that I did with this is I started thinking about responsive design. And so responsive design in web terms means I have this full web app, and then whenever this web app is viewed on a smaller form factor, all the design changes, the CSS changes, it becomes nicer to look at. So if I'm looking at some like a Wall Street Journal or something like that, on a desktop it's really big. If I look at it on an iPad, everything kind of sizes down automatically and flows more nicely. In an iPhone, it even changes more. So I said, why can't we do that same thing with a Windows application? So what I have here is this is just a Windows application that I wrote, is just looking at client versions that are coming in. This data came from EdgeSite and puts in a nice little pie chart, and the data down here is below. And I said, all right, that's what it would look like if you ran it from a desktop. Now, what if I wanted to look at that on a mobile device? That's really not going to be a nice form factor for a mobile device. So what happens is these are 3 screenshots from a mobile device. So the first thing you have is this, just a chart. And if you click on the chart, it shows pickers here, and then that's just choosing the donut chart. And if you flip the phone sideways, or the device sideways, it will show you the data that is generating all that chart, because we don't want it all on the same screen. We want to react, and so we're able to react to an orientation change on your mobile device. Now remember, this application is actually running on a XenApp server. XenApp has no idea about orientation change. It's a Windows device. I have no idea what orientation is, but Receiver on the mobile device detects that orientation change and reports it up to the XenApp server, and it says, hey, orientation changed on that mobile device down there, and now you as a coder can say, I can react to that. So let me show you what that looks like. Okay, back over here. to our iPad. And so, actually, I'm going to keep it on the desktop first. So I'll show you what this looks like on the desktop. So again, I have, like I said earlier, I have some VMs here running for the demo environment. This is my XenApp server. And I come over here to the responsive demo. If I just run this right here, this is what the application looks like natively. You have a file menu structure to go do things. I want to change the chart type to donut. I can do all this. All the columns sort like they should. It's a Windows application, right? Minimize, maximize, close buttons. Now, if I come over here to my iPad and run the exact same application, and this is not a different executable. This is the same executable. And so here I have the I connected to this. This is the chart view. If I click on it, sorry, I'm not something going on with it. Thing here. So if I click on this, I have my native device picker, and I say I wanted to choose my donut chart. Now, and this is nothing special except that the all of this is just Windows Chrome is gone. We move the file menus away. But the cool part is when I change the orientation, that sent that orientation change from my iPad. My iPad reported up to the XenApp server, said, hey, the orientation changed on this device. My code says, all right, when the orientation changed, show this different view. Now I'm going to change the orientation again. That's going to report it up to the XenApp server. My code reacted to that change. And again, I have all my stuff here going on. So change and change. Now there's code on this application reacting to all this, but the device is sending all those signals up to that code on the remote XenApp server to give you those things. And so real quick, I said we were going to get into Visual Studio just real briefly. I'll show you what that looks like. And we won't get too deep into it. You can, if you want to go to my website, you can download the code that actually does this. It's free for everyone. All right, and so basically, this is what the actual code looks like. This is the entry point to the program. So what we're doing here is just filling some chart types. But the thing right here is we're setting the app style, and that's we're down here. The set the app style is. First thing is detecting whether we're on a mobile device or not, which that's just making a call to the Mobile Application SDK. And if we are mobile, then we style it with mobile, which we take away a lot of the Chrome. We just, only show the graph. And then we also set up the event handlers for that orientation change. And then if you're not mobile, we style it normal for Windows. So the same executable has a responsive design. It behaves different on a desktop than it does on a mobile device. So that's there's other code in here if you want to get deep into it, but that's the gist of the Mobile Application SDK for Citrix. Works on XenApp and XenDesktop. Questions? Yes, sir.
Since you've done both, I guess is it worth the effort to do this rather than trying to do an actual native app?
So the question is, I've done both. Is it worth the effort to do this versus an actual native app or even a Phonegap app, right? If you have a Citrix environment, I like this because it solves the data problem. One, all the data's, this is running in the data center, but also I was a C# coder before HTML and JavaScript, so this was not a big deal to do to me. So this is quite a bit easier. If you're not, crazy about actual coding, you just want to do some HTML and JavaScript. If you want to hire it out, it's a lot easier to hire somebody that does HTML and JavaScript versus some native code. I like this, but you have to have a Citrix environment. Everything, the other things, you don't have to have a Citrix environment to do that. So, answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Just want to make another comment. There's actually a lot of options you're leaving out of this talk. Okay, so to start with, Phonegap is really hybrid apps. It's creating HTML5, JavaScript, and then there's callouts, etc. for native UI frameworks. If you're going to go to the link, though, of coding like a Visual Studio style, there's IDEs for both Android and iOS that works. There's also a native tool called AppCentric that actually delivers native apps that are cross-platform, similar to what you described for Phonegap, but they're actually native with native controls. So the landscape is broader than what people are trained here.
Sure. Yeah, we only have a finite amount of time, so I'll show you what I personally have done myself, and so within the time constraints. Yes, sir.
Basically, that's a framework where you can write the code in C# and then it runs.
Oh,
Yeah,
I have heard of it.
It runs on iOS, on Android.
Yeah. So yeah, I actually have heard of that code. So where you're actually doing you create your code in C#, and then it's actually going and form factoring. Because actually, when you do anything in like a C# or VB.NET, you're actually compiling to a Microsoft Intermediate language that the .NET framework then can interpret. So then there's another framework that interpret that and go into native code versus native Windows code go into native device code, basically, right?
Yeah, and it basically allows you to write the logic of the application once, and then a lot of the UI elements are still platform specific.
Right.
In that case, but allows you to share some of the code.
Yeah. Yeah, so we don't have a demo on that, but yeah, I am familiar with that logic as well. So if you're a C# coder and you want to do this native device, you can compile into multiple platforms that way. Yeah, that's another one. We should get that one on here as well. Okay. Other questions? All right. We did our responsive design demo, and I am going to hand it off to Warren at this point to do some of his wizardry.
Okay, so we're just going to do a quick laptop change, but while that is happening, you raised a lot of good points, and as Jason said, our time is limited, so we can only touch on a few issues. Data is one of the biggest issues that we talk about, whereby, where is the data? And that's really where a lot of these technologies, the VMware, the Citrix technologies come from. We're trying to say to people, why are you storing data on your phone? Bosses are coming to me and saying, I still have an application that I invested a lot of money into on Windows. And I don't want to bring in an iOS team or an Android team to spend another gazillion dollars to try and redevelop it. And that's really what we're talking about here. Jason said it right at the start of his slide deck. This is an interim measure. This helps you get your application that's in-house up to the mobile workspace in a quicker amount of time. You can still have your developers in the background redevelop the app, but right now, we can get it to that point. So I'm going to ask straight up, as Jason sort of moves around, how many coders do we have in the room? Okay, proud coders, excellent. How many people who don't really think they're coders but can do some code? Yeah, so that's most of us. So Jason and I always have a laugh about this. Our backgrounds are quite different. We're not trained programmers. I'm actually a woodshop teacher from way back. So I used to bang pieces of timber together. So our backgrounds allow us to actually sort of dive into the code. I will ask one question. How many C# coders in the room? How many C++ coders in the room? The real coders are here. That's good. C# people, the door's there. But in all honesty, it doesn't really matter what you code in. It's all about how you develop that code. So Jason's just flicking that up as we go. Okay, so where we sort of touch on here, we're trying not to be Citrix-centric, so we certainly get your point that VMware has a product as well, and there's other products out there. But Citrix certainly did make life easier. In the sense of our applications, and I'll log in as we go, when you actually develop an app for your native environment in Windows, so let's just say you've got an in-house application, and you turn around and say, okay, I've got an application, it might be an ERM or something to that effect. What do I look for? What do I need to do? My data's in the back end. I've got a Windows app that delivers that user experience. And I'll just tap on this as we go. The idea that you want to develop in your head when you're developing a Windows device, a Windows application I should say, is that you want to create that application experience for your user. So what point are we at now? And as this comes up, just give me a second. So the point we're at now is very simple. I have a little Samsung Galaxy Tab 2, I think it is, from memory. And I'll just type in the password there. Connect. So I'm going to go through this sort of scenario that we got given. So I think you might have picked I might be from a different country. I don't know whether you worked that out. But in Australia, we have a lot of mining sites. And one of the biggest issues we were faced with was the user experience for an application. So well back, way back in the dark days, A lot of mining sites. Are there any people who run mining sites or are involved with mining sites in the room? Okay, so I can explain how it works. You have your miners that go in shift works. Okay, so what actually happens is the miner turns up to the top of the mine, about to go down the shaft. We're talking about going way down. In the dark old days, we had the thin clients, and the thin clients would be at the top of the shaft. Each person would have to log on, click in, say yes, they've turned up at the top of the mine shaft, and they're ready to go down. And that would go into the ERP system, and they'd clock their time, that would clock all those elements that come in. The problem in Australia, we tend to drink a lot. And we'd clock in, we wouldn't go down the mine shaft, we'd go to the pub. Okay, so after the pub we went, and we'd have a few drinks, and then it was time to clock off. We went back to the thin client, we'd just simply type in our credentials again. You beauty, we got to pay for the day. Fantastic stuff, we were off. We didn't have to do any work. And that was actually a very common thing. It might sound funny, but workers were doing that consistently. So along came and they were using Citrix for that matter, along came the Citrix Mobility Pack, and it's now, by the way, called HDX Sense. And you can see, by the way, this is all turning all over the place. HDX Sense is actually the new name for it. So we only just found that out a little while back, so our slide decks are always funny. But the particular mining site said to me, okay, Warren, I want this application that can connect to my ERP system. I don't want to modify my ERP system too much, but I want to use a mobile device because every single worker is allocated a corporate device. And I want to use that corporate device to track that user. And I'm scratching my head and I'm thinking, well, we have to get iOS developers, we have to get people working, we have to get them thinking of how we can write an app that ties into your back end, whether it be SAP or whatever the case might be. So this is a bit of a cut down version that I've done because I can't show you the real app because it's owned by the company that I wrote it for. But the idea being that we want to use the device to track that person. What features do these devices have? Throw it up at me. That's it? Awareness? Okay, what else? Geolocation. Location? What else? There's another thing we all use. Camera. Someone whispered. Who was that? Okay. Who does selfies? I only found out what that was yesterday, so I just used that term. Okay. So basically, I went, hang on, a selfie, or as I call it, a photo of yourself. Let's incorporate that. Let's bring that into the current app that we've got. So what I did is, I didn't have to recode the front end of the app that much. I had to make it.
How bloodshot your eyes are or something with the selfie?
I'll go into that in a minute. There's actually a good story about that. But the idea being that we could use the features of this device. Now, this is an Android device. I could do this with iPhone as well. But all I had to do was essentially tell the application that I intend to use the native elements of that phone. Or whether it be a full tablet. But in this case, these people were carrying phones. So this is where we go in. So I'll just give you a quick demo, then we'll get into a little bit of code. So I call this XA Face Punch, but as I said, it was given to a mining company. This is all free, by the way, on my website, which I'll show later. You can see the code, you can see the elements. So basically what it is, you'll see it on the screen. I'm just going to sort of hold it up. Ideally, the person would come up to the top of the mining site. So this isn't just for a mining app. Think about this for your workers. And I'm talking big brother. I'm talking we're following our people around. We want to know where our people are. We want to watch what they're doing, and we want to know where they are at any one time. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to punch in. So I come to the top of the mining site. I'm going to punch in. It comes up and says, hold the camera up to your face. And in a couple of seconds, it will actually activate that camera. There you go. Okay, that's everyone there. And it will actually use, and I should point out, I probably didn't point it out, that application is running on a XenApp server right now. It's not running on the mobile device. I'm using Citrix Receiver, and that's all. I have an RDP option of this as well, and the VMware option would work just as well. Okay, so I'm just demoing in Citrix because that's what I had at the time. But I'm using that native device to use the camera. Okay, so I'm going to take a photo of you guys. I hope you're not ugly. Okay, I get the option, as soon as I take that option, I get the option of saving it, discarding it. So if it's not a good photo of myself, I can simply say, I'll try it again. So if I discard, I'll try it again. In this case, I'll save. So, and I'll get to a few other issues. So that starts processing. I'll spin it back around the right way. The next thing that comes up, and I'll talk about why this does this in a second, It says XenApp Face Punch wants to determine your location. It wants to ask the question, where are you? In this case, I'm going to say, I'm going to allow that to happen. I'll talk about that in a minute. As that's processing, this is all happening on a XenApp server going back to the database. Sorry, I'm Australian, I say data. You say data. Okay, so the database is processing all this information. So from a SAP back end, all we did was add a couple of fields. And we said, okay, we're going to take the photo. And we're going to put that photo into the database. We're also going to take two other things that this device has. We're going to take the date and the time, and we're going to also take the location, which we just did. That's all going to go in that database, and I'm going to be able to track that user. So they turn up at the top of the mine site, they have to take that shot. The next thing people say to me, well, that's easy. They take the shot, they still go to the pub. What stops them? Because I can then call up the person, HR can call up the person and say, okay, right now, I want you to take another shot. You're 300 feet down a mine, you take that shot now. I want you to do it. Now, most people are sort of sitting there and saying, hang on, we were watching the screen while you were talking. That took a long, long time. And you're quite right. Why do you think it took a long time? Have a guess.
Bandwidth back to the server.
Bandwidth was one, absolutely. What else? Why would bandwidth be an issue? What was I trying to do? Not quite distance. What was I trying to do? I was sending a photo from the native device back to the XenApp server. So we all loved the way Citrix used to actually transfer local data back to the XenApp server. It was always an issue. Okay? So in this case, this photo would end up being probably 2 meg in size. And because of the bandwidth, it was quite slow in processing. Okay? With the new mobility pack, you can actually determine what size this photo will be. And you can actually turn around and say, well, I want a quarter of that size that it actually took. So the native device, just like you do when you take a camera app and you say, right, take a photo, send that to someone via Twitter, then it comes up and it says, do you want this to be quarter size, half size, large, small, etc. So the same can be done here. I just got a little bit lazy. So the photo came up, and I don't know, you probably won't see this. I'm going to try my best to get it in there because I just embedded it into the photo. But I've actually got the date and the time embedded into the photo for this case. But that same information actually went down, and you'll see the usernames up there as well. That information went into SAP. And all of a sudden, the HR department's excited because they can follow that person wherever they go. They can trace that person. So another scenario we had, I think it was in London at BriForum, someone put up their hand and said, hey, I work at a university. We could trace students and lecturers. Of course you can. Absolutely. Lecturers. When do they turn up on time? So we can trace that. We can get that information. So a lot of statements came out once I did this demo. I say, what's this thing you have to press allow? What's that about? Well, sadly, we have privacy laws. And when you start transferring data from your mobile device up to your XenApp server, doesn't matter whether this is your mobile device or the company's mobile device, we have privacy rules. And so I begged Citrix and I beg every vendor, VMware, etc., can we forget that allow button? No. Of course, we can code it to forget it, and we all know how to code those things around, but officially, we have to ensure that the person actually says, yes, allow that to be passed up. And that's a really important point. Okay, so there's a lot of things we have to do there. So, yeah, give it a wiggle. Thanks, mate. So the idea being that we have to think about the way we code because those sort of elements come in. So the next question someone said is, okay, maybe I'm super clever and I'll get a photo of myself. I'll go down the pub. I'll take the photo in front of the, in front of the mining site. I'll just have that photo with me. I'll pop down the pub. I get a phone call. Just put the photo up. I'll take the snapshot of that. I'm super clever. We have another element that is in Citrix and the RDP structure as well, that I can actually either ring that person once that's been sent. So in other words, this device can actually be used to send out phone calls as well from that SDK. You can actually code it to say, once I send a photo, also send an SMS or make a phone call. So SMS as well. Okay? So all these elements were there, and that's what we enjoyed about it. we structured this entire app for every person to carry a mobile device, and we could trace everything they did. So they didn't have to put in at the time they were there, they didn't have to put in where they were, etc. We had it all. Location, we had time, we had date, we had a photo. And it all went into this app. We just added an extra database field for the photo. And there we were now watching these people. Do you think productivity sort of went up? Absolutely it did. People started thinking of ways around it, but every time they thought of that, we just used those native elements. Okay? So that's a great way of using these elements. So you say, well, that's great, you're a coder, you know, that was easy for you to do. And it was easy, but it's easy for any coder. That's the whole point. The idea behind it is that we had an application already set up. And that application was a SAP front end, and I'll try and get out of this. It's not going to let me get out of it. The application was essentially set up for essentially native Windows at the very start. Let's have a look. It doesn't want to go. Just hang on a second. Press Control-Alt-Delete. What a great name for a company. Okay, kill that. And that one. So, as I said, people said to me that, you know, you can do that code, you can make it work, it's all easy. And it was really easy. So, as I said, it's now known as HDX Sense, and formerly known as Citrix Mobility Pack. All of those elements of your phone can be used, and it makes life really easy. But okay, that's enough about Citrix for a minute. What if I only had RDP? What can I do to do the same experience? Does anyone sort of want to throw up a guess at what you might actually do? Any idea? How do you think Citrix do it? How do you think they're actually notifying you that there's a mobile device in use on their receiver? Have a think. Why are we using Citrix Receiver? This one's a tough crowd. I don't know, the English guys were straight onto this. What are we looking at when we look at the actual... Okay, so you've got... Let's go back to classic old Citrix, classic old VMware, classic old RDP. What have you actually got on your device? So we've got... sitting on our desktop right now, we've got a Wise terminal. The Wise terminal has the Wise OS. How do we know we're running Wise OS? Well, it's a tough crowd today. I'm going to have to get excited.
It's early.
It is early, true, good point. Okay, what do? There was a thing that within any API that was brought out when terminal services, we called it back in the dark old days, was thought about. Now, I don't know how well you can see that screen, so I'm going to try my best to show you the bits that are there. And you're going to see some code. This is C++ for you purists in the world. Okay, I don't really do C# that much, but C++ is always good. And I'm going to slide back here, and hopefully I'm going to find the right thing, orientation. Let's get back this way. Have a think, while I'm doing this, have a think of how we actually can achieve this. RDP, Citrix, VMware, whatever the case might be, what are we looking for in all of these instances? You can yell it out if you want. These are a tough crowd, Jason. Very tough crowd. Okay. Now this is the Citrix aspect, so we do mobile device calls. Okay, I'm going to put you out of misery. This is killing me. I can't believe this. Okay, we're looking at what the OS or what structure is on the device. We're making a call to the device to saying, what are you? In Citrix sense, there's a little element that says, what is your client ID? So Citrix has that built into their SDK. And we can say, if it's a 1, it's Windows. Mm-hmm. If it's a 10, it's an Epoch device. Remember those devices? Weren't they great? I used to have one. We could go right through the whole range. RDP actually has something similar, but they don't go into the devices like the Citrix structure does. Okay? And VMware in this case as well. If you're trying to code something, you need to understand what the SDK for that structure does. If it can actually find out what is on the device, there's your first call. The first thing you're going to do with your application, so you've got your in-house application that you might have built or an external code, You bring your coder in and say, let's make this mobile. And the first thing you do is say, how are we going to know you're on a mobile device? You're going to look at the OS, or you're going to look at the client that it's running on. So if you've got an RDP client, no matter what, you can actually find out very quickly, what is that RDP client about? That's the first thing as a coder you're going to do. What is that client about? So do you need the Citrix Mobility Kit or Citrix HDX Sense? No. You just have to be a good enough coder to put in there what operating system are you running. When you're doing a Windows application and you're writing it specifically for Windows 7, what do you put in at the very top of your C# or C++ code? What do you actually throw in there to say, I want you to make sure that you're running on Windows 7? Come on, coders in the room. I know you're awake. I can hear you. Brain's ticking. You check what OS is running, and you ensure that at the top of your C# code or C++ code that you are running that OS that you want. The same occurs with a Windows application as well. So we can do this in RDP, we can do this in Citrix, we can do it with VMware. We're detecting ourselves this application. So going back to the Citrix aspect, the same, and this is another application I wrote called QA Code Scan. So I'll quickly run you through that, and Jason, watch me for time because I can talk all day. Ideally, I wrote another application called QA Code Scan that will, same thing as what I'm doing with FacePunch. You will take an application. It's running up on a Citrix server. Your data is up in another location. So we're making sure we keep everything off the device. I use the camera again to scan a QR code. You see them all over the place at BriForum. They're everywhere. There's not one in the room, but they're everywhere. And we scan that using the camera of the device. And then we pass that up to the back end, to the data server, and let it do the work from there. So that's exactly what I've actually done here. I make mobile calls. I say, okay, right now I press the button. Five. Okay, I've got 5 minutes. Oh, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough. If I ran this app, okay, if it wants to run, it may or may not.
It's running.
Can you see it on the side there?
Yep.
Okay. So I squished this up because I wanted to actually make another point. Before we were making it look like or Jason was making his look like an iPhone app, and he got excited about it. He said, look, it looks like an iPhone app. And I said, I want to make it look like a Windows 8 app. I didn't do very well, but I tried my best. Okay, I looked at some colours and I said, let's make it look like this. So we squish things around, etc. So the same happens with the structure you've got. You can press the button, it'll activate the camera. We didn't actually point out within this structure, you can see there's an emulator in the background that's got Citrix all over it. Part of the new SDK is they have included an emulator for any, whether it's Android, whether it's iPhone, whatever the case might be, the emulator sits in the background and you can run the emulator off that. So people say, well, how can I take a photo with an emulator? You essentially just load a picture. When you take that picture, it'll actually come and say, okay, what JPEG do you want to load for now? Okay, and it'll do that.
And that makes it really easy for when you're debugging, you set breakpoints in your code, because before you'd have to actually do remote debugging tools and run one thing on your client and have your code on your server and have breakpoints set, and it's really awkward to get set up. So that makes debugging quite a bit easier.
Yeah, extremely awkward, believe me. We were always switching between phones and devices for this particular item. Okay, so one of the big things, I'll go back to RDP. So I'm flicking between because at BriForum we're independent here. We don't like to talk about just Citrix, although the Citrites in the room will be saying, just talk Citrix, mate. Not today. Okay, so we talk about different things where we say, okay, again, I've got an RDP client on my iPhone or Android. How do I make the application that I've got on Windows resize to be an iPhone or an Android device? Well, let's go back to basics. Let's look at our screen size. Let's actually have a look at the paintbrush. Let's look at the colours we're using. Let's look at the different element about. So I know I've only got probably 2 minutes left because Jason's looking at me rather funny. But the idea being, I know when he looks at me that way, he always says, get off stage, mate. Okay, so what we're looking at here, and I'll just get to the very, very top of this particular section, is, okay, and I'll just highlight that. What I actually do is a little bit of math. I was a school teacher, as I said, not that sort of teacher, but woodwork teacher. But ideally, I will take the device. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get the screen size. I'm going to get excited about what size that screen is, and I'm going to straight away start doing some math. And I'm going to say, right, based on that screen size, I want these buttons to be positioned, you know, basically maybe a fifth of the screen, maybe a quarter of the screen, whatever the case might be. So yeah, I have to do a little bit of coding. But the idea being, I've talked about this, what you want to do, you've got an existing application. You just want to put something in the front end to, number one, say, what are you? So right now, we've got our existing application that we've coded in-house. What are you? Well, hang on, you're a mobile app. I need to turn around and say, straight away, the first bit of code isn't launching the actual front screen. What are you? You're a mobile device. Okay, if you're a mobile device, let's forget all the standard Windows structure. Let's start building our own form. So you may actually have to build another form, or you can do a little bit of math, as I said. That's what Citrix are doing. They're just making it a lot easier for you to actually avoid all that stuff. The keyword mobile, that's what it's doing. It's actually saying, hey, this could be a mobile device, so I want you to check first. And I want you to go through that. So I've probably only got a minute left. So I'm going to just show you how, and I think Jason did show you very quickly, where in fact, we'll go back to the Citrix aspect, where in fact we can use the camera. And it's a very, very simple call. So I do a lot of calls in a lot of elements. And I'll just go to this part here. Simple code. When it gets there. There we go. Okay, this one's for SMS. CMP notify user. And I can notify the user with an SMS. And you can see further up, calling the keyboard, hiding the keyboard. I've got the whole swag of things there. That's how sort of Citrix made our life a little bit easier, because they essentially created an SDK to actually fit all this stuff in. So all these elements, you can see, I've just simply used a case statement to say, if it's case 8, in this case it's an SMS, if it's case 7, it's a keyboard, I can just make those simple calls. So when I press a button, up comes that picture. And I can see someone's coming up to say, get off stage, mate. So the idea being that all these things for you are there with Citrix, they're there with RDP, and I'll just quickly mention a product that we didn't have on our slides. It's called iRDP. It's a freeware structure for your iPhone to use RDP to allow the camera, the local SD card, etc. to work. Okay, so there's not just a Citrix product, there is RDP products as well. I think that one's $10, and that's how cheap it is. Okay, and you can use it wherever. So I'll wrap up there. I would love to get into more coding with you guys. So if you sort of want to know more, Jason and I, as I said, we have our slide decks, we have the website up there. All this code is up there for free. It's all wonderful, it's all out there. You can do what you want with it. If you want to know more about, as I said, the face punch where I actually delivered it to a real mining site, come and talk to me, tweet me, whatever the case might be. So we're pretty well done for time, because everyone's looking at me saying, get off. So thank you very much for coming. Thanks to Jason, and we can talk later.